We want to make sure and thank our sponsors for this season on Agentic AI. Infor. Most AI can't tell the difference between a yield loss and a rounding error. Infor leads with AI built from the ground up for the food industry, from demand forecasting to shelf life to catch weights. That's precision. See how at infor.com. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech, the podcast where we explore the technologies shaping the future of the fresh produce industry. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest emerging tech topics in enterprise technology and AI right now, agentic AI, and the idea of the agentic enterprise. There's a lot of talk and hype around AI right now, but many companies are still trying to figure out some very practical questions like, what does this actually mean for my business? Where do I start? What problems can AI solve today versus someday in the future? And how do companies adopt AI without creating chaos, security risks, or expensive dead ends? To unpack all of that, I'm joined by Jared Helenic from Infor. Infor is one of the largest ERP companies in the world with a major focus on food and beverage manufacturing and distribution. And Jared works specifically at the intersection of food operations, AI, automation, and innovation strategy. Welcome to the show, Jared.
Thanks, Vonnie. Appreciate you having me on today.
Great. Well, I give a little introduction about you and the company, but why don't you say a little bit more? Because a lot of people, especially in the produce industry, haven't heard about Infor. So tell us a little bit about the company and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So Infor is the third largest ERP company in the world, and we specifically focus in on manufacturers, distributors, and also services companies, with one of our main segments within manufacturing being food and beverage. And that's where I come into play. So my role is specifically to help understand what the challenges of these food and beverage manufacturers and distributors are having and how we can leverage technology, whether that be agents, machine learning, automation, and see how we can help optimize their businesses so we can increase profitability and also keep that overhead as low as possible. So Infor has been really, really good over the last, I'd say, almost 10, 15 years now of being leaders and being one of the first ERP that's completely in the cloud. We partnered with AWS back in, I want to say 2014, and we haven't looked back since. We are one of their largest actual AWS footprints out of all of their customers. So not only we've been able to be in the cloud for the last decade plus, but we've been able to innovate quickly. So we've been in artificial intelligence since I want to say 2018 now. So we've been leaders within the AI space, within the manufacturing distribution segments for quite a while. And now we're really excited to talk to you today, and not only the rest of the industry, about the agentic enterprise and how that can help shape the businesses within agriculture and what the benefits are, not just the tangible hype that some people get into.
That's great. Really helpful, because I know that's what people in the industry are now asking us, and they're hearing the term agentic AI.
Yep.
But I was actually at an agentic AI event recently with Google's a half-day event, and I got to say I left more confused than when I went in there. So it's even to those of us that think we're a little closer to it, it's still a little confusing. So let's start simple. What is agentic AI, and what do people actually mean when they say the agentic enterprise?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with just a non-technical analogy because I think that's really where I like to start, because we can get into the weeds, but a lot of the times that's unnecessary, what I find. So think of it like you want to make a lasagna. Well, in the current form, if you want to make a lasagna, you can go either on the internet or a cookbook and you can find it. Then you have to go get the ingredients. You have to cut them up. You have to take inventory of what you have, go cook the lasagna and come back. Think of that as the current state with chatbots today. They're single interactions. They're not actually going to do any task for you. Agentic AI, think of it as your private chef. They're actually going to go take inventory of what you have. You tell the chef, I want a vegetable lasagna today, or a sausage lasagna, whatever it may be. They go to go find the groceries. They pick out what the right produce is. They go cook it. They do all the cleaning, and you get the end result. Agentic AI is all about the end user giving the end goal to AI and allowing AI to go plan out what steps it's going to need, what tools are going to take to accomplish that task, and actually go executing it autonomously on your behalf. And then they come back to the end user with the results. That could be an analysis, that could be a summary, that could be an action. We'll get more into specific details of what those are like. But that's really what agentic AI is. It's The ability for artificial intelligence to take in an end goal, allow it to plan, and actually execute that goal on your behalf. And the really fun thing that we're starting to see is now AI, the agentic AI, is also now starting to plan, well, how can I do this more efficiently with this task? So instead of taking this 10, 15 minutes to get you a response, their goal is how can I shorten that? So that's really what the race is right now and how end users can leverage agentic AI to do tasks on end users' behalf.
I love that. That is such a great description. So I think when a lot of produce companies hear about AI and especially agentic AI, many think immediately about robotics or computer vision. But a lot of what you're talking about is actually enterprise workflow and decision making. Is that a fair statement?
That's it. Bingo. Exactly.
In some of the materials that I was looking through of yours, one point stood out to me that was why generic AI falls short. So, and honestly, I think this is where many produce companies are struggling right now. Everyone is experimenting with ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Claude or whatever your favorite chatbot is. But that's very different from solving real operational problems. Yes, I'm glad you can tell me what flights I should take, but we really want to solve some real operational problems. So why does agentic AI struggle in food and agriculture environments? What makes our environment difficult and harder to get adoption?
I've seen this not just within agriculture, but with almost all of our customers here at Infor. It's that these large language models and these processes, they're built to be generic because what they're trying to do is fill a huge market gap. So they're trying to cast a wide net of use cases. But the challenge is that makes them a mile wide and an inch deep. That's not really what our customers, especially at the business and enterprise level, are asking for. They'd much rather have an inch wide and a mile deep when it comes to in terms of context, having an understanding of what the business actually does. And so when these agents and these large language models are trained specifically to interact with the agricultural companies, food and beverage companies, they have a better understanding of what it is the end user is actually trying to accomplish versus these more generic large language models. I mean, they've been trained on the internet. And there's a lot on the internet and not all positive and not all accurate. So having these more small language models, more precise models, that really makes a big difference to making sure that the end result is accurate, it's precise, and it also helps cut down on hallucinations because it's no longer just trying to guess what you think you're trying to do. It's more understanding of, okay, this grower has a pre-seed season, now they're in season and a post-season that they actually have to go harvest. Having that context makes a big difference for it to give you the more accurate information that's more relevant to the end user, is what we're finding.
So how do you have that? I can see why it's important to have this industry context and domain specific data, but how do you have that, and then how do you put that together to make the systems work within our particular industry?
Yeah, so we have that because, well, to not to toot our own horn, we've got quite a few smart people here at Infor, but but not only the smart people, but we also have a cohesive platform. So to do true agentic, the systems have to all be interconnected. For example, if you have a document storage that isn't connected to your integration platform, that isn't connected to your front-end business applications, it's going to be very difficult to get answers because it's going to need to touch many different areas of your business to get the full picture. So what Infor has brought is not only just a smart people to help develop these models and also kind of curate them to make them more industry specific. We also have this underneath platform called Infor OS, Infor Operating Services, where all of those main features that you're going to need, a document storage and integration platform, an API platform, also security features and functionalities and role-based access, we have those already pre-built. So we have a nice level set where people can start off with. And now we're building on top of that for the business applications, whether that be your ERP, your supply chain planning, your product lifecycle management tools. So we have not only the back end figured out, but we have the front end figured out as well. So when we're building out these agents, we know, okay, this agent's going to need to hit these different data sources in this path, and all of these paths are already interconnected, which helps cut down on hallucinations or just not getting the right answer because everything's already playing nicely together. Agentic really only works if your core business applications and systems can talk to each other neatly and nicely. If they're all disparate, if they're all living in their own different world and cloud, it's going to be very difficult to expect an agent to be able to figure out what's happening if your own systems can't talk nicely to each other. So that I think between not only the smart people, but having that integrated platform and having these platforms be designed for these food and beverage customers makes a big difference in the accuracy and precision that comes out the other end.
Do you think companies underestimate how fragmented their data really is? So when you go into work with them, do they think everything is playing nicely together already, and you have to dispel them of that belief?
It depends on who you ask in the company. If you ask the CEO, it'll probably be a very different company than the CIO. Answer that is. But for the most part, what I've seen is all in all, most companies at this point realize that they did this whole digital transformation. They moved from on-premise equipment into the cloud, which is great. That's a really good step. But now they've started buying third-party applications, and maybe it was siloed into one, niche user group. And if that isn't integrated fully into your data management strategy, it could really harm you. So what I'm finding is people are moved to the cloud, but now we're really haven't addressed the clouds, not to say cloud sprawl, but the integration of all those cloud applications just yet. It's a little bit 50-50 with some people being understanding where their challenges are and some people don't. And that's where there's tools like master data management that Infor has that really helps alleviate those challenges.
So when people say, I hear this constantly, is that I know we need to do something beyond. We finally gotten people that we're not talking about using generative AI, like everyone's doing that, yay. But now when they're looking at workflows and agentic AI and really being able to help the way that they operationally run their business, not just plan their day, they say we need to know how to start, but we don't know where to start. And they're also afraid of like, well, if we go with one company like Infor, then what if that's the wrong decision? So, from your perspective, where are the best starting points for like a produce or a food company, and how do you actually start the onboarding and get people going?
Yeah, and it's a very difficult question, but in a broad stroke, here's my perspective. And McKinsey actually just had a paper on this back in January. There's two different approaches to AI. There's the use case approach, and then there's the holistic business unit approach. The challenge is there's a faster time to deployment when you're doing niche individual use cases for those third-party applications that would layer onto yours. They're going to go very quickly, but the challenge is that's where it stops, is that one use case and that one just area of your workflow. What McKinsey's point of that study was when you start at a holistic business unit, like operations and finance in particular for growers, that's a really good place to start because that's where the crux of your business really is in operations and in finance, right? So being able to understand, okay, we're going to start with, let's just say, procure to pay, for example, as a workflow that we want to go through. It's really important that you don't just silo into like one very specific use case, like automating supplier invoices. It's important. It's an arduous task, but let's take a step back. Do you know where within your workflow are you experiencing bottlenecks or challenges? Is it trying to understand what vendor you should be going with, or if you're in what inventory levels are, or trying to potentially understand, okay, when do these action decision points are happening? Are we making the right decisions? That's really where you want to take a step back and look at the true end-to-end flow and understand, okay, well, we're pretty good in some areas, but in other areas, we can either have better visibility into data so we can make better decisions, or there's a huge paper process, especially in food and beverage. I mean, we can talk about certificates of C of A's, we can talk about proof of delivery, bill of lading, supplier invoices, trade invoices. There's so many documents that are happening within these businesses. So if you haven't started automating there, that's a really good place. But don't just try to look at one use case. Look at the whole end-to-end use case and try to figure out what's going to make the most sense for my business. And what we're finding is more often than not, those end-to-end flows in operations and in finance are having the most impact. It's not going to be the fastest, but it's going to have the largest ROI comparative to a siloed use case that may not stretch the whole length of the flow.
I'm just curious about your sales cycle because, like, you could obviously go in and talk. They probably have you talk to the IT department first, but you really need to talk to the head of operations and the head of finance and hopefully the CEO, and they've got to get comfortable, and then you've got to integrate all that. So in a company that hasn't done much, like they've got some stuff in the cloud and that sort of thing, but How do you approach and what does your sales cycle look like?
Yeah. So when it comes to, let's say someone doesn't have any Infor footprint and they're doing an evaluation of an ERP, usually we like to go in and understand and actually watch the day-to-day cycle of what is happening. Like what are the individuals doing within either within the field or within your distribution centers or your warehouses, and understand what's the actual workflow. And typically that's a conversation with operations, but not even at the COO level. A lot of the times we're talking about like operation managers, the individuals that truly have their pulse on what's happening within a business, not just the COO and the executives who are getting a lot of weather reports, as we like to call it. They're not actually getting a sense of really what's going on. So we start the process by understanding what's going on today, and then really understanding by business unit, what would you like that end state to be? What are your challenges? What are the things you're doing repeatedly that you just don't want to do? A lot of the times we're hearing it's data entry. It's just changing a certain line item on a purchase order, or it's also just creating, a lot of times, yes, many customers do have e-commerce websites, but what we're finding is buyers don't like to buy from e-commerce websites. So they just get an email with a chunk of text, and now they have to put that email into an order so they can put that into their process. So how can we help automate that section? And those are the types of conversations that we get into, is understanding what's happening actually at the ground level. And honestly, we're reporting back up to the executives and giving them our recommendations on what's going to make the most sense from a phase 1, 2, and then beyond from there.
And how long does that process usually take? Mostly the implementation. Or let's step back a bit. Can you give me an example in produce specific that you've worked with someone and kind of how long the process took to kind of get them integrated?
Yeah, so there was one particular grower. I can't reference their specific names
Yeah.
due to the
Nor
NDAs and all.
should you.
But one of their challenges that they were having was they have a huge amount of grape. The issue was, depending on where they were in the field, the soil acidity was going to impact how the grapes were actually going to be grown at the rate that they were going to grow. So the project we ended up doing with them is we're actually taking drone data, and we're taking in that drone data feed, which is now highlighting using machine learning to understand, okay, that grape tree is ready to go, or grape plant is ready to go pick. Which now the downstream effect of that is, well, now that we know what that right harvest model is, that's going to impact labor scheduling. That's also going to impact your forecast. That's also going to make sure you can fulfill your contracts that you have, because this is a pretty substantially large grape grower, and they have third parties that they have to address. So that end-to-end process probably took us roughly from about very beginning first conversation to actually getting things off the ground, anywhere from like, I'd say 4 to 6 months on that, depending on who you want to ask of what's live and what's in production. But that's just one use case that we've been doing.
And people pretty patient with that?
It's all about setting expectations, Vonnie. So if I were to say we're going to get this done tomorrow, that's going to be tough. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we always like to put not only our best foot forward, but be realistic. This is a substantial change. So also the other key thing that we haven't really discussed is also, how are we going to help manage the change management side of the house? Because that's also going to be mission critical. I mean, if I gave you a magic wand that says every single tree, this is when you should pick it, but if you don't use it, well, then what was the point of the magic wand?
Exactly.
So making sure that the individuals understand that this isn't about replacing them, this is more about optimizing their day, so they don't have to look and stare at plants and think, maybe, let's make a gut decision on it. It's a lot easier. So that's why we kind of like to start at that either, manager level or individual contributor level, because when you start there and we lead with empathy and understand what their challenges are, they adopt these tools a lot faster. So I think there's really two ends to this story here. There's one of getting it into production, and then there's actually using it for production, which is usually two different answers. But that's why we try to like to lead with that middle level.
So one thing that produce companies care deeply about, well, probably most industries, but for us, risk is a huge thing with food safety, traceability, compliance, and financial controls. And so many companies are nervous about AI making decisions autonomously that may be wrong, but it seemed right to the decision points. So you do spend a lot of time talking about governance and segregation of duties. Why is governance becoming such a critical part of enterprise AI?
When it comes to the governance piece, it's mission critical, because If you have an employee that asks, for example, my boss is named Steve. If I go into our chatbot and say, hey, Steve, hey, chatbot, how much does Steve make? Well, I shouldn't be having access to that information. So it really shouldn't be returning me that. But that's why having these role-based access controls in our position is an ERP already has all those things. An ERP, when you're setting up an ERP, you set up the user permissions, you're setting up the security profiles of who should have what. So when you're trying to implement and leverage these agentic capabilities, it's already based off of what you've already decided on as you're doing this implementation. So that's just one piece of it, of the governance side. From the security side of the house, having and working with a company like Infor is really powerful because we're based on AWS, which is the leading cloud provider. So from a true like data center security, all that, and then redundancies, that's all been built into there. A significant amount of our internet is based on AWS. So we have to trust it. So, but the other key thing to think about is also just our position isn't just automate everything and humans are nowhere to be found. Our key component is human in the loop. That's what we really think about as the agentic enterprise is how can we combine the human experience of interacting in this digital environment with the agents that they're going to be leveraging. And how can we do that cohesively where an agent, could they do like a translation? Yeah, that's cool. That's probably going to be fine. But before they go push the send button on a purchase order, a human should be probably reviewing that. So understanding where those decision points are and what makes the most sense when you work with a company like Infor, we're really able to understand what those workflows are and where those decision points should be versus just letting AI go run wild and you end up with 10,000 pounds of sugar randomly one day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The typical question I ask people in these types of things is when you look ahead 3 to 5 years, but I hate to ask anything 3 to 5 years with agentic AI because everything, like you said before we started recording, is changing weekly, if not daily. So let's go 1 to 2 years. So when you look ahead 1 to 2 years, what changes will change most dramatically in food and produce businesses because of agentic AI? What do you think the impact is going to be?
Efficiency. I think the efficiency per employee is going to go up dramatically. An employee, like let's just take someone in accounts payable, for example, they no longer have to process every single invoice. They can just get the exceptions and then they can start managing more mission critical tasks that are going to be effective to the business. Or let's just take someone in accounts receivable. Okay, so they're trying to look through, okay, who's delinquent and all that. Agentic AI can be able to do that very easily, but not only they can do that, they can go create the dunning letter, which is then you send that out to the customer, say, hey, you owe us some money. So having the efficiency per employee, I feel like is going to increase dramatically with these tools because we're taking away the mundane. We're not taking away the hard decisions. What we're taking away is the data entry, the creation, the analyzing, the seeing outliers that are there. Agents are able to do that very easily and bring them forth to the end user for the end user to make that decision. So instead of someone like, for example, a sales rep having to go out there and build a portfolio of all these different potential options, you can have an agent go build that portfolio for you. And it's actually going to give you a good understanding of based off of historical sales records, based off of the history with this company. Here are the top 3 SKUs you really should be focusing in on versus what the rep may think or may take an extra 30 minutes to an hour trying to figure that out. So these analyzation use cases, these summary use cases, these translation use cases are going to be done automatically. And it's up to the human now to think about, okay, where do I want to spend my time more effectively versus doing these not so interesting tasks.
That was going to be my last question, but I have one more question. As you look forward, we've seen a lot of cases over the years of just the kind of the digital divide of the people who do get on board with new technologies and people who don't in the produce industry, but also just overall. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be? I mean, obviously there'll be companies that don't adopt to this, and do you think that they'll just end up kind of perishing because they can't keep up because of lack of efficiency, or like how is it going to work going forward between the do's and the don'ts?
It's really going to come down to how ambitious do you want this company to be. If you are happy with your run rate business and you have your set of customers, you're not really looking to grow, you want to be where you're at and you're comfortable, this may not be the best, it may not be necessary to do agentic AI. But to be candid, I have not heard in my 3 years here anyone ever say those words to me. So you don't know where those people are. good luck to them. But for what I have heard is we do need to grow. How can we move more profitable with less headcount? If those are your challenges and that's what you're looking to do, these are the conversations you need to have now. And I'm not saying you need to go jump from, hey, I have an on-premise business application and now I go jump to agentic AI. That's a bit of a stretch. Let's take this in consumable bite-sized chunks. Let's do your digital transformation. Let's get you into the cloud. Let's get your main business applications, your enterprise resource planner, your supply chain planning applications, warehouse management if you have distribution centers. Let's get those into a multi-tenant fashion. With the reason being is so now we can take this digital data and then leverage it with artificial intelligence to help you make better decisions, to automate workflows. And then the next step is that agentic, where you can now have effectively, for lack of better words, your own Clippy. If you remember Clippy from Microsoft, you can have your own specialized Clippy to go do these workflows for you and these mundane tasks, like trying to figure out who's delinquent instead of you going to have to figure it out yourself. So that's what's really exciting is you don't have to take a big jump all at once. You can take it in bite size, and I would actually highly encourage you to take it in manageable steps. This isn't going to be a 6-month project. If you have nothing today, this is probably going to be a multi-year project. So partnering with someone that can give you that light at the end of the tunnel is going to be mission critical as you make that decision for what's right for your business.
I have so many more questions, but we're going to stop here. I think this is so fascinating. We're actually watching the transformation of business here. And it's going to make
Yep.
such a huge difference. And just seeing how people adopt it and the change that it makes in such a complex industry like produce, of all the different points that, one of our biggest problems we have in the whole supply chain is nothing is connected and nothing talks to each other. And so I'm
Yep.
just so excited to see this type of technology. And I think there are, the super early adopters of people in our industry. They're trying to do it themselves, and all power to you. Please go try to do that. Um, Hopefully, you won't break anything. But I think having companies like yours that have this huge powerhouse, and then also are getting this very specific domain expertise, like that's who you want to partner with. So, thank you so much
Yes.
for your time, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, and we'll continue to follow as you transform our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Vonnie, for the opportunity. It was a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.